All right. Welcome to episode number 370 or 80 something, I believe, of the Restoring Rapport podcast. This is a podcast for young believers who are pursuing the goal of marriage and family and trying to get married as young as possible in a healthy way according to God's design. I'm your host, Seth. I come on twice a week, every week, and I try to equip and encourage you in that goal. And today we're going to be reviewing a video that's right up the alley of this show. It was recently put out by Jeremy Pryor, one of the co-founders of Family Teams, and he's reacting to a YouTube video by James Sexton and Lentz on whether or not individuals should get married young today and kind of the ramifications of that and just the whole conversation surrounding whether or not you should do it. And so naturally, just because the title is stuck out to me, I watched at least 3/4 of this with my wife a couple weeks ago or a week ago or so. And just really thought it was going to be something that I wanted to talk about. And we're going to kind of compare as we go through this video, the claims that are being made by, James Sexton and Lentz. Yes, but we're also going to be, comparing those to the most recent data that's come out of people like Brad Wilcox, who is the world's leading sociologist, as far as I know, when it comes to marriage studies. And then we're going to be reacting to Jeremy Pryor's take on this as well. And Jeremy always has awesome things to say, so go check out his podcast. It's called Jeremy Pryor's Podcast. But without further ado, let's go ahead and watch this and see what they all have to say.
It's in that moment.
Well, God hates marriage. If the proof is in the pudding, he might as well call us to jump out of airplanes without parachutes.
Maybe James Sexton,
Oh
the world's most famous divorce lawyer, talking to Lentz, whose marriage is recovering from his infidelity. Talk about why you should not get married young.
Okay, so let's pause there already. We've got some stuff to talk about. So you have a divorce lawyer, not only that, but the world's most famous divorce lawyer, evidently, and a guy whose marriage is recovering from infidelity. So two guys who I would say do not exactly have a rose-colored, lens through which they view marriage, because both of them seem to have very poor experience with it. And this is something that you'll see over and over when you're talking to people who are counseling you against getting married as a young person. And like literally 100% of the time, those people will either A, have had a bad experience with the opposite sex themselves and therefore have decided not to trust them ever again. They've had a bad experience with marriage. They've done marriage wrong and therefore think marriage must be the only way that you can do marriage is wrong. Or they've seen a lot of poor marriages, not their own personal marriages, but they've seen a lot of people have poor marriages. And that's the case that I think James Sexton is going to fall into. He's going to be the kind of camp where he's just seen so many couples coming into his office with their marriage in shambles, and that he is actually affecting his view of marriage. But it's not, what you'll notice is that you can always find sob stories and anecdotal evidence that tells you that you should not get married. But for every sad story of marriage, there's also a really happy story of marriage. So you can't just throw out, your experience with marriage as a bad thing and make the claim that it's a bad idea. And so that's what we're going to kind of get into today a little bit. But just keep that in mind as you hear them make these claims, because all the time these opinion claims are being made from a position of viewing marriage as a bad thing because of the things these people have seen. And the real thing that I would encourage you guys to do, if you're a young believer moving towards the goal of marriage and family, is not to abandon your quest for a healthy marriage, but instead of taking advice from people who have only seen poor marriages, you need to go to people who have amazing marriages. So just take a few minutes to identify the people in your immediate vicinity, the people in your life who have marriages to be envied, marriages that are extremely successful, marriages that really produce a lot of good fruit in all areas or even in specific areas. And then those are the people that you need to ask for advice. Because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble taking advice from people who shipwrecked on their way to a goal that they never got to and therefore cannot give you directions to that goal. If you're after a happy marriage, you need to take advice from people who are currently there and not from people who say it's not possible.
They are missing the most important variable, but let's listen to how they think about young marriage.
When it comes to marriage, like you're signing on for something without giving a lot of thought to what it's going to be. Like the metaphor I've used in the past.
Okay, stop. marriage is not something that you have to enter without putting a lot of thought into it. And that's certainly not something that I did. My wife and I got married. We didn't even have a 6-month dating anniversary before we got married. And so I met her in September of 2022. We were married by July of 2023. And we didn't start dating until January 17th of 2023. So yeah, we did not have a 6-month anniversary. We got married before our 6-month dating anniversary. So we had a very short engagement. We got engaged in May. From May to July, we were married. So we only had a 2-month engagement. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. In fact, I would have done it sooner if I'd had the opportunity to, if I'd met my wife earlier than I did. And so I just don't think that you can, make the claim, again, from experience, because not all people are like this, that everyone, let me go back and get his exact words here, but I'm pretty sure he said, like, people don't plan and prepare and think about, and prepare themselves for marriage. They just sort of jump into it. Let's go back and listen to that again, because these claims are really big deals.
They're missing the most important variable, but let's listen to how they think about young marriage.
When it comes to marriage, like you're signing on for something without giving a lot of thought to what it's going to be. Like the metaphor I've used in the past is, if you asked me or asked Carl when he was 20, you can have any car in the world. What car do you want? It would either be like a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, or like a muscle car. Yeah. It would have been one of the, most guys fall into one of those two categories. It would be a muscle car.
So you heard right there. I mean, he just said that you're not, when you get married, you're not thinking about the future. You're not thinking at all. You're just sort of making an impulsive decision, which, yeah, I'm sure people do that. I'm sure there are people who do marriage wrong, and I've seen people who, haven't approached marriage right, and they've ended in, disaster or whatever. But like, there's always people who do things wrong. You can't make the claim that there's not a right way to do something just because there are people who do that thing wrong. Like, that's a very serious mistake that we need to be very careful making, because what you're doing is you're robbing people of the outlet through which they're most likely to have a very happy life and serve people to the utmost of their ability by making these claims that, are really not true. But you're just, sometimes they're true, but you need to acknowledge that. Like, it's not like you can't just say marriage is a bad idea because look at this guy. He did this so wrong and his life fell apart. It's like, yeah, he did. That's a disaster. But that doesn't mean marriage is bad. The more likely scenario is that his approach to marriage was off from the start. And so he got a bad result. And so the solution is not, abandoning marriage entirely, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but rather making sure your approach is good. And you might ask, how do you make sure your approach is good? The answer is you go to people who have the kind of marriage you want, and not the people who have a marriage that has imploded because they had a bad starting point.
Or it would have been
until you hit what, 40?
Right. Then
then we're going Prius.
Then you're going Prius.
How much mileage?
Right. You're going to go Toyota Sienna in your 30s because you got the kids and you got a lot of stuff. Okay. So what if I said to you, when you're 20, pick whatever car you want, you're going to have that car. And then you go, oh my God, I want a Ferrari. Great. By the way, that's the only car you're ever going to have. Wait, I'm sorry? What? Oh, that's the only car you're ever going to have. You can't have any other cars. You're not even allowed to ride in any other cars. That's your car. That's your car. You picked your car.
Dang. Okay. Kind of where I think he's going to be going with this, if I remember correctly, is like he's comparing people to cars. and that is, I think, just a bad comparison for a number of reasons. But also, like, cars fall apart. Like, they don't get better over time. They get worse over time. Like, when you get a car into 300,000 mile range, you better be getting rid of it, or it better be a really good car, because its days are numbered. You know what I'm saying? And like, a marriage is not like that. And this is evidenced by people who have had 75-year marriages, and like, they've been married for longer than some people live. And so and by the end, they say they have a better relationship than they did at the beginning, or in the middle, or 2 years ago. They say that they currently have an insane relationship with one another. And so that's the kind of thing that doesn't get worse over time, it gets better over time. So it's exponential growth rather than decay. And those are two very different things, again, because people are not cars. And relationships specifically are not cars, and marriage specifically should not be compared to purchasing a car, because cars lose value, and marriage, if you does it right, produces and gains and multiplies value.
Wait, no. I picked the car I wanted because I'm 20. Like, it looked nice and it had a loud engine. I wasn't thinking about, where will the car seats fit, or how does it sit? And I might have some sciatic pain because of my herniated disc. Like, I wasn't thinking about when I'm 80 getting out of a Lamborghini. So what's marriage? Marriage is you're 19, you're 20 years old. You're like, oh my God, she's so
Okay,
pretty.
stop. The national average age of first marriage for men in this country today is 29 to 30 years old. The national average age for women in this country, as of, the 10s to 2020 ranges is like 27 years old. Okay, in 1960, you rewind, and the national average age for men in this country was 23, and the national age of marriage for women in this country was about 20. So he's kind of living, 80 years ago. He's not or 60 years ago, I should say 65, 70 years ago, whatever. He's not living in the present day. He's giving advice to a past generation and not the current generation. This is outdated information. The idea that people get married mostly at 19 or 20, which is actually what I think they should do, we'll get into that later, is not what's being done. Okay. It's people are postponing marriage, almost a decade into the future longer than they did in the 1960s. And so I don't understand his point there at all.
Oh my God, he's so handsome and he's tall and I can wear heels with him. Okay, you know what we should do? We should get married. Yeah, let's do it. And everybody's going, yay, you're getting married. There's going to be cake and we're going to have a party and everybody signs on. Meanwhile, you just picked the car you're going to drive for the rest of your life. Have you talked about, do you want to have kids?
What he's doing here is he's kind of, I'm sorry, I'm stopping him a lot. I know we've only made it 1 minute, 57 seconds into this video, but I just want to clarify, like, this is kind of like a fear tactic. And I'm not saying that's his motive, but I'm saying what he's saying is producing fear in people by basically sowing FOMO. He's like, well, what, you haven't really thought this through. What if something better comes along? What if this breaks down? What if? And it's like, you're imagining the worst case scenario. And by the way, worst case scenarios only happen once you've made a million bad decisions leading up to that point. Like worst case scenarios are not something that you just wake up and find yourself in when it comes to your relationships. Worst case scenarios are what happens when you live 10 years making bad choices and it all comes to, an exploding point, a boiling point, and there's no way to there's no easy way to fix it at that point. You can undo those 1,000 bad decisions by making 1,000 good ones, but it's not like you could. My point is, you don't have to be afraid of just waking up one day and your marriage being like that. Like that's not how it is.
Your faith, if by the way, I lost my faith or suddenly found faith, would that change the dynamic of our relationship? What if I became a vegan? Would you be cool with that? What if I'm a vegan now and I decide I don't want to be anymore? I want to eat pork chops. Are we going to break up? Like nobody, you picked your car and you signed on for the car.
Can I lovingly interject and double down? Because to me, when I really have the nuts and bolts conversations about this, that's what I point to is if there is a huge flaw in the Christendom marriage cycle, it's the age in which we push people to get married. Because
we don't push people to get married at all in the in Christendom. And I can say that because I'm a member of the body of Christ. I'm an actual follower of Jesus. And I am constantly involved and interacting with members of the body of Christ. And like this, that we're not pushing people to get married. In fact, there's very little marriage teaching whatsoever coming out of the church when it comes to whether or not young people should get married. They just kind of leave it up to, what they would probably term the individual's conscience. But really what's happening is we're leaving it up to an individual's experience with marriage to determine whether or not that individual wants to get married. It's like, oh, you've had a bad experience with marriage. You're probably going to choose not to get one. And that's not always the right way. Like I've never seen people being pushed into marriage by the church. Okay. Here's what I have seen. Marriage being portrayed as a form of idolatry, relationships with boys and girls being very dangerous things, which they are. But again, you've got to balance that out with truth. There are also very necessary things. Like you've got to have a relationship with the opposite sex, unless you're like Paul, which 99% of believers aren't. And so nobody ever says that. They're just like, oh, don't make your boyfriend or girlfriend an idol. By the way, emotional entanglements are very, very dangerous, and don't have sex outside of marriage. And, you don't have to get married just if you want to. And it's a very serious decision and you got to make all these considerations. It's like, okay, yeah. All that, might be true depending on, how you phrase some of it, but it's also an incredibly fulfilling way to live and almost a command in scripture if you look at a lot of other verses that you're not bringing up. And so for 99% of people, it's a command. There are people who are exceptions to that rule, but as a general rule, I think scripture makes it very clear through verses in, 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and, in Genesis where God says it's not good for man to be alone, that the general rule, the stereotype is that you shouldn't live your entire life without a partner. Okay. And so I disagree with the claim that Christendom is pushing individuals towards marriage at an early age. I think all those are wrong. I think the early age thing is, just again, outdated advice. We're pushing marriage 7 years into the future further on average than we did in the 1960s. And, less than 49% of adults ages 18 and older are married in this country. So I don't think, and that's not specific to Christians. So I could actually get more accurate with that information, but I don't know the data on Christian marriage, so I can't give you that, sadly. But I do know that less than half of adults ages 18 and older are married in the country today as of the year that study was conducted. And so I don't think that we're pushing people to and even if we are, they're not choosing it. Like, marriage is not some, universally accepted path today. You see a lot of people going different ways, and they're eating the consequences of those decisions, and I don't think they're good consequences. But let's continue with this video here. We haven't even gotten to Jeremy Pryor, who's going to break down what they're saying in a second and give his take on it.
Laura laugh. When we got married, do you think that she was looking across at a guy who, I'm finding out who I am today. I won't be the same guy tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Let's stop right here. If you're still finding out who you are at age 40, you were not given a vision by a mentor or a parent in your life pointing you towards goals and purpose and casting vision. If it was left up to you to figure out who you are, and you were not told who you are, which I think is a terrible, terrible situation for children to find themselves in, and I feel bad for that guy, but you're not in a position to, make out this, paint this narrative that nobody knows what they want, because a lot of people are handed vision. A lot of people are handed purpose. A lot of people are told who they are at a very young age. And I was one of them. At 15 years old, I had the exact same vision for my life that I do now over a decade later. Okay. This is not something that you have to discover into your late 20s, early 30s, even 40s. This is not a good narrative. This is not a correct narrative. You don't have to find yourself in the situation this guy is, where you're still figuring things out, what you want to do with your life when you're in your 40s. That totally does not have to happen. Case in point, I know this is not true because this is my life story. Okay. I was told I had an awesome nuclear family. I was brought up in a Christian home, and I was given purpose and vision for what my life should be. They didn't make me find it. They didn't say go out and look. They didn't say, you can choose from these 3.5 billion options. They said, this is what you were made for. Walk in your purpose and do your best and do everything as you're doing it unto the Lord. I was handed everything that this guy's been looking for 35 years or whatever. So you don't have to, what's the word? Okay, if you weren't handed the purpose, if you weren't blessed enough, if you were not fortunate enough, however you want to phrase this, if you were not given purpose as a young individual and you looked for it for 20 plus years and you still haven't found it, instead of saying that all people should not make important decisions while they're young, you should raise young people and give them the vision and the purpose that you were not. Okay, you should remedy the problems that you've experienced in your life, not propitiate them or avoid them altogether.
I'm 46. I'm just getting cooking. By the time I'm 50, I'm really going to have a good idea about this much of who I am. That's the nature of what you find out. Your self-care, your mental health, your journey. This is all stuff you start to learn as your brain changes.
Okay, your brain is always going to be changing. Neuroplasticity, very well known fact. See, these guys are making a lot of claims, but the scientific and number claims they're making are not accurate. They're making claims from personal experience. This guy's like, I didn't know what I wanted when I was 18, 19, 20. I don't even know what I want when I'm 40. And so everyone else must be like that too. And there must be no other alternative way of doing this. Therefore, you should not get married when you're young because you don't even know what you want. And so his logic is good, but his facts are not. He's arguing from experience, and he's not arguing from empirical data. He's not arguing from the experience of people who have done it right. He's just looking at marriage from his car that's on fire. You know what I mean? And his car's on fire not because something just happened and he flew off the road. So that's probably a bad analogy using a car, but it's because he made 1,000 bad decisions leading up to that point.
We're going to look at a 22
And I'm not insulting this guy or anything. I'm not being arrogant or anything. I know like this guy's probably insane and is amazing and brilliantly talented as an individual and businessman and all that. But like, I'm just saying like, if you want, okay, go to him for business advice. But if he doesn't have a good marriage, I don't see why you're going to him for marriage advice. That's kind of what I'm saying.
And we're going to pump up this marriage. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. I don't know what the answer is, but I am really curious about, even in my own house, I got 2 girls, right? And I'm not going to say you can't get married young. I am going to say, my love, please understand. Take as long as you can to find out who you are.
Okay, stop. He is raising his children, by my estimation, the exact same way he was raised. He is raising them to figure out their own purpose, so you can expect them to be 40 and still not know what their purpose is. They're still going to be looking, okay? It is a parent's job to impart purpose and meaning and vision into their children, okay? You are to hand them what you are not giving yourself. That is your job. And it astounds me that he's missing that here. He's like, I want to ask him, do you see it as a good thing that you don't know what you want in your 40s? Do you see it as a good thing that you're still looking for vision and purpose and meaning and what you want to do with your life in your 30s? Because I imagine you don't see that as a good thing. I mean, if you value this kind of freedom and doing whatever you want and kind of aimlessly wandering around, figuring everything out and starting from ground zero instead of taking the advice and wisdom of prior generations, then go ahead, do that. But I don't think there's a very strong case for that. And he's recreating this in the lives of his daughters by his own admission right there. He's like, sweetie, take as long as you need to figure out what you want and what your purpose is and what vision is and everything just by yourself, because I'm not going to do a darn thing to hand it to you. And that is, I disagree with that parenting style. That's not how my wife and I are going to raise our children. And look at the fruit to decide if that's the way you want to raise yours.
And if you really like that guy, let's figure out a way to make this, resourceful. But let's take our time.
Okay, these two didn't get anywhere near a reasonable answer. Carl is saying, maybe by the time you're 50, you'll know yourself well enough to pick somebody to get married.
You won't. If you don't know yourself at 40, you're not going to know yourself at 50. You don't know yourself at 50, you're not going to know yourself at 60. I mean, that's just how it works. By the way, this is Jeremy Pryor talking now. And so he's reacting to this video, and I'm now reacting to him reacting to this video.
Okay, that's obviously not going to be helpful. We need to have this conversation because delaying it from 23 to 26 or even from 25 to 35 does not solve the problem that they're describing. The problem they're describing is much, much deeper, and there are lots of ways to solve this problem that they don't explore at all. So let me talk through the analogy they use and just kind of help us understand, okay, what are the options? Is getting married young really reasonable? Now, one of the things that James Sexton is sort of framing this issue with is this horrendous, close to 50% divorce rate.
Okay.
And he's saying
the 50% divorce rate is a projection and not a measurement. It was a projection of a group of studies. It was what people thought was going to happen in the modern world, and it did not end up coming true. The real divorce rate is nowhere near 50%. You can just Google this, and I'll do it live for you right now. What is real divorce rate in, I should have typed in the United States. Let me do it right now. What is real divorce rate in the United States? There it is. Okay. What is real divorce rate in the United States? According to the CDC. Okay. And this is an AI overview. So you can actually, no, this is not an AI overview. This is a link by Purdue University. I imagine this is a good source. What I would go to myself is the actual CDC numbers, which I have. You can go back and look at them in prior episodes. In my state of Ohio, I think it's like, I can't remember the exact number, but 3 to 7 individuals out of every 1,000 people will end up getting a divorce. Now, that might not be as low as you think just by how it sounds, because that does include that 1,000 individuals is total population. Like it's exactly like it's saying right here. So that's old people, children, teenagers, unmarrieds, widowed, everybody. So you can't just say it's like 2.5% of people will get a divorce, because that, and it was out of 1,000 anyway, so that wouldn't be accurate. It's not that low, but it's never been 50%. That's the point I want to make to you here. That was a projection, not a measurement. And so if James Sexton, which I didn't hear James Sexton base his argument on the divorce rate, but if he does that in that video, that original video, which by the way, I should probably go back and watch that entire thing and walk you guys through it and talk to you about it, because there's probably a lot of, if he's arguing about, if it's all of his arguments are based from the starting point that we currently have a 50% divorce rate, then that's a very easy video to refute, because that's not true. And it's, again, you can look, this is common knowledge. This is not like an opinion piece. This is an actual, this is a measurable data claim. Okay. 50% is not, 1 out of 2 is not your odds for getting a divorce. That is simply not the case. Never has been. And so, yeah, just don't listen to people who say that and perpetuate. I think I said perpetuate last time. I meant perpetuate the idea that you have a 1 in 2 chance of your marriage falling apart. That's simply not true.
This just seems like a really, really bad bet. You're going to make a commitment at a young age to somebody, and it's going to be reliably fragile. So the question is that normal? Is what we're experiencing in our culture
correct.
Normal across history and across cultures?
Correct.
And of course,
and again, this is the important point. Like, his logic, I'm sure in that video is impeccable. I'm sure he's thought it through, but like his starting point was off. The numbers, he should have looked at empirical numbers instead of his own personal experience, or he should have looked at least tempered his own personal experience with the stories of couples who have a great marriage, instead of just looking at the ones who have come into his office.
The answer to that is no. We've done something to marriage. We've redefined marriage in a way that has made it incredibly fragile. And what we really need to do is address the underlying foundational problems that our culture has given to marriage. Do you guys know the divorce rate in India today? So today, think about any percentage that you have in mind. What do you think the divorce rate is in that country? It's a much more traditional country. And even with all the Western influence that has gone into India, today the divorce rate is at 1.1%. It's about a 99% certainty that whoever you marry in that culture, you're going to stay married to. And I'm sure that there's lots of problems with marriages.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to point out. I was like, immediately your brain will go to, it's like, well, yeah, they have a low divorce rate, but what's the quality of those marriages in that country? Like, are they simply staying married to abusers and people who do not take care of them and all this stuff? And it's like, just that is totally possible. And I don't know the stats on India. All the stats I look at are this country, okay, the United States of America. I'm not looking at worldwide yet. Now, maybe I'll move into that and start looking at some more data for worldwide marriages. But I'm talking about marriage as in the Judeo-Christian sense, as a vow made before God and people to commit to one another for life, be faithful only to one another for life until death do you part. That's kind of how I'm looking at it, and talking about it. Okay. And so, but the point is, marriage, that example shows that marriage is possible to have an incredibly low rate, because that's a modern day number, which I've never seen where, I don't know where he got that number, but I trust him as a source, because I've listened to his stuff in the past and everything he says checks out. And so, I just trust him as a source. You guys should check out his podcast if you would like to, discover whether or not you think he's a good source. But man, I have really, really liked his content in the past couple of years.
In India, but that actually illustrates one of the major differences between that we approach marriage and the way that these two men are talking about marriage. So the way that they're framing this is some man or woman, they're picking a car. They're just asking themselves, what are the things that I want in a car? And there's no mention of anyone else giving them wisdom that have lots and lots of connections to what actually is going to help the marriage succeed over the long haul.
True. And again, and you might ask, why did they present marriage that way? Why did they present marriage as this thing that's an individual decision, that's not guided by community, that's not guided by parents, that's not guided by mentorship, that's not guided by a social net? And the reason, of course, is that because the people who come into this guy's office didn't do that. I mean, they probably came at marriage exactly like Mr. Sexton said they did. Totally without thought. Okay. And you might ask yourself, is it a real shock that they ended up the way they did? It's like, marriage is not, you can't just do it any way and it work out. This is not how the world works. There's not like infinite truth. There's not all paths are created equal. Jesus says in John that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Okay. He is the way, the truth, and the life. The only way, the only truth, the only life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him. That is, case in point. If you believe who Jesus is, who he said he is, and he's not a madman, then, you kind of, as a young believer, you kind of have no choice but to know that in life, you don't have infinite options that all lead to the good thing. You don't. You can choose the roads that lead to the good thing, but you don't get to decide what the roads are. And that's what I think these people are just not, James, Sexton, and Carl Lentz are not touching on. And it's like they think that people can go in to marriage, or maybe they don't think, but they are. What I'm getting from what they're saying is that they're under the impression that young people should be able, or could be able, if marriage is a good thing, to go into it without any sort of social reinforcement or structure or mentorship, and it turn out fine. And it's like, that's not how it works. Of course that's not going to work. Okay? How the world works, how marriage works, is you go in having put a lot of thought into it. You go in having committed and not treat it as an experiment. You go into it with the blessing of very wise individuals in your life. You go into it with the blessing of Scripture. You go into it with the blessing of one of the largest religions in the world. Okay? You go into it with, I don't know, it's not just a you decision. Okay? So your actions should be guided by wisdom. Okay? You might ask, how do I find wisdom? Okay? Wisdom is in, as the Bible would say, a multitude of counselors, and not counselors who are where you don't want to be, but counselors who are where you want to be. Again, surround your marriage with marriages that are to be desired, and allow those marriages to influence your decision-making process. And I think you're going to end up in a much better place, a place that's way better than anything you could have arrived at on your own. And I don't think that's some grand leap of logic. I think that's a very just simple and true statement. I honestly believe that, guys. Like when I tell you this stuff, I'm not just spouting bullcrap out of I actually believe what I'm saying earnestly, and that's why I'm saying I wouldn't say it if I was, in doubt. Does that make sense? And so, yeah, I think that's a great point that he drew. The way they framed marriage, a decision of what kind of car you want, they didn't talk about that decision being guided by other more wise individuals. They just talked about you making it as an isolated individual, which, as Wendell Berry would say, to speak of the health of an isolated individual is a contradiction in terms, end quote, because there is no such thing as an isolated individual. You can't make good decisions, or as good decisions as you could by yourself, if you have the wisdom of really loving and knowledgeable outside forces. You can't. It's not a solo sport. Okay.
In India, it's famous for the fact that parents often arrange marriages, because if you're going to make a decision like that is for life, and it's not like it's sprung on you all of a sudden, like you pick somebody and then all of a sudden you hear for the first time that marriage is a lifelong commitment. If the entire family is working together to bring all of the wisdom of the family into that decision, and both the potential husband and the potential wife want to get that feedback from their families, then you're going to be making a lot more wise decisions. We have decided as a culture to make this about whatever kind of fleeting attraction you feel, in the same way that you might see a car drive by and say, "Ooh, that would be nice to drive that car." Yeah, that is a cultural problem. That's not a problem with marriage. We've decided to think about marriage in those terms. We've made all these movies and all of these songs about the fleeting attraction that a man might feel for a woman, or a woman might feel for a man.
Amen.
And say that is the basis for how you decide who to marry.
Amen. And let me do clarify. I do think that attraction is important, but as you will see in this PDF that I'm about to pull up for you, if you're basing your marriage only on the curb appeal of your partner, then that's a pretty poor foundation to but that's supposed to be, in my opinion, the starting point. That's supposed to be what incentivizes you. One of the things that incentivizes you to find a match and commit to that match. But I don't think it can be the only, part of the bedrock that you have that you can build your marriage upon. And like Jesus said, you build your house on the sand. And when the storms come and the wind blows, your house is going to be in shambles. Okay. But if you build the house on the rock, you can withstand this stuff. And you can look here. I'm trying to figure out I'm scrolling through a lot of stats with you right now, but this is the end of the article. I think it's right here. Orphaned, shared faith, more sex, shared faith, better sex, in God we trust. Religion helps, not harms your marriage. Breadwinner moms are more common among low-income families. No, where is it at? I should have had this pulled up before for you, but I didn't know that he was going to bring up that exact point, and I want to make it because it's like very, very important. Let's see here. Married parents are happier. The Parent Trap. Let's see here. More date nights. We Before Me. We've reviewed that one before. The Soulmate Myth. Oh, okay, here it is. Okay, here it is. All right, the figure 5.1. More husbands and wives embrace family first model of marriage than the soulmate model, and kind of what Jeremy's describing. And well, Jeremy's, it was really originally described by James Sexton, but this idea that you build your entire marriage, your 70 plus year goal marriage is built upon this curb appeal of your partner as she walks by. That is an incredibly important ingredient, but not the thing that you can build your marriage on. Does that make sense? Like that is, and if you try to, your marriage of course falls apart when your wife loses or changes into her season of motherhood and old age with you, which by the way, you go through as well through fatherhood and old age. And so you can't build the whole marriage on that because your marriage is going to last longer than you even have your body that you currently have. And so like, don't make it like that can't, and again, I'm not understating the importance of the sexual and romantic and attraction. I'm not underemphasizing that. That's important. That has to be there. I'm just saying that's the starting point and not the bedrock. And that can't be the only thing that your connection on your wife is built upon. And you can see here in this figure, the share of husbands and wives who embrace family first versus soulmate model. This is based on on married adults ages 18 to 50. And the source is the IFS California survey conducted in 2019. You can see 27% of husbands and wives embrace the intense emotional and romantic connection as, the bedrock of their marriage. And then 73% of the husbands and wives that were in this study put kids, money, and raising a family together as the foundation of your marriage. Now, I do think this is kind of, I wish it would have said, this is a measurement though. So, I mean, this is a measurable data. I do think though that there is still a part that romantic attraction plays in marriage and that doesn't ever go away. And I don't think that it's something that you should, get married without, definitely. And, you can get other sources for that. Like I know Jordan Peterson says that and a bunch of other people, like you need to be attracted to your partner. It doesn't hurt to find your partner sexually attractive because you're going to be going through all sorts of problems and tumultuous seas with this person. So that can do nothing but hurt your ability to connect with each other. But I don't think it can be the only, I think it's a commitment and not just a desire. Like marriage is entered out of a commitment and not just out of fleeting infatuation. Because if you just enter it out of fleeting infatuation, when that goes away, suddenly your marriage is in a lurch. So there's got to be more to it than that, but it's also an incredibly part of a healthy marriage. I hope this chart has kind of, summarized that a little bit for you. But this is a measurement. He says the soulmate myth is love for as long as it makes me happy. In other words, if you're not feeling happy with the way your partner is talking, looking, behaving on year 30, that doesn't give you the right to leave the marriage. That's really what I'm trying to say. Okay. Attraction's great. I think it's a very important part of entering a marriage, yes. But you can't just say, people who are still married, most of them, as you can see, 73% of them say that kids, money, and there's a combination of things. Kids, money, and raising family together is, the bedrock, the foundation, the purpose kind of their marriage. And not just that curb appeal, soulmate myth. And so I think that is important to understand.
And that is of course, a crazy idea when you're talking about a lifelong decision that goes through all these stages. The second problem with the analogy they're using is that the car never changes. It just gets old, breaks down, and you have to swap it in for a new one.
Amen.
And of course, that's what James Sexton is seeing in the families that he works with. As a divorce lawyer, people just are constantly watching their marriages fall apart. And their response to
Amen.
that is to just trade the marriage in. Actually, what happens in a really good marriage is that because you've made a covenant, a lifelong commitment to love each other, you get better and better at loving each other,
Yes.
then the more kinds of adversity, the more challenges that you face as a marriage, you get to go through and grow together. You're not a car. You're constantly evolving. The person that you marry when you're 25 years old is not the same person that you're married to when you're 50, 60, 70 years old. You both change. And it's the covenant and the love you have for each other that allows you to get through those challenging times. But it's actually a really, really good thing that you change. It's really good that you're not constantly the same model that you were when you were young.
Yeah.
And so the analogy they're
Again,
using,
like cars don't get better, like, and that by they don't change at all, other than the fact that their value goes down. Like that's totally not analogous to marriage in any way. So I don't like that analogy that James brought up. Okay, because a marriage is exactly opposite of that. Okay, a lot's going to change, and if you're doing it right, the value goes up and not down. That's the key difference.
really doesn't make any allowances for that. And I think that that's the second flaw to the way that they're describing this. The third thing is that James says, he's constantly saying, well, what if you want this? What if you want that? Describing basically a person who's making the decision around who they marry based on individual fulfillment, desire
Yes,
for self-expression.
correct.
And it's really important to understand that one of the things that creates a lot of stability within marriages in India and other more historic or traditional cultures is that they're not primarily getting married as a desire to fulfill some kind of internal need. They're trying to found a family. And so part of the equation is, yes, I want to have a deep and meaningful love relationship with my spouse, but also we're trying to found and continue a multi-generational family line.
Amen. And that is something that is not said enough. And that's why I try every time I talk about the reasons to get married and the scriptural, push to get married. I try to, every time I mention that, talk about not only how marriage is good for you, but how it's really good for your children. Okay. And how there's no other really, alternative way of raising children that matches marriage as far as the benefits go. Okay. And that's just, again, a very data informed fact. It's not an opinion. You can't say, well, I can raise my child in this alternate family or this, different way of, different romantic situation or this alternate, family style and produce the same fruit that a nuclear family marriage produces. And more specifically, I would say a multi-generational family of healthy nuclear families. You can't say that because it's not, the numbers don't lie. I mean, and again, this is not a debated topic. Children who, grow up with both present mother and father are less likely to be incarcerated, more likely to graduate, more likely to make more money, more likely to be physically and emotionally healthy. Like the list goes on. They're better in every single area of life. They're less likely to have problems in school. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So, I mean, that people need to know that.
And that creates a situation where it's possible for every man and woman in a relationship to hit that bar. I can't fulfill every desire that my wife has. My wife cannot fulfill every desire that I have. We put way too much freight on modern Western marriages, and it's almost like taking that Ferrari, just dumping thousands of pounds on that thing. It's only designed to carry, a few hundred pounds, and watch as it just gets crushed under the weight of all of that freight. And that is a huge systemic problem to the way that we see marriage. So we need to take a look at these analogies and understand why it's still a good idea to get married when you're young if you have the right vision for marriage. But if you are primarily operating like a normal Western hyper-individualistic person, then you are never old enough to be mature enough to make a decision around marriage and find the person who's going to fulfill every one of your desires. There is no amount of wisdom that's going to come into your life that's going to predictably create a marriage that's going to be able to bear up under that much freight. So
yeah, totally agree. 100% agree with that. And I can't shake the feeling. I cannot shake the feeling. And I think he did this on purpose because the car analogy is usually used to encourage individuals who are wanting to get married to have sex with other partners before. And I think James Sexton is doing this on purpose. Okay. I think he's using the car analogy because he's approaching marriage as a sexual living situation only and not a living situation that produces a good family. He's not thinking about it from the family perspective. He's thinking about it. He's not even thinking about it from the romance perspective. He's thinking about it seemingly exclusively from the sexual perspective. And that's why he immediately drew the Ferrari example. He's like, somebody drives by in a Ferrari, you're like, wow, that's amazing, we should get married. It's like, that's the attraction process. Again, that's not the thing that makes your marriage last. And again, I'm not underemphasizing the importance of that God made it that way for a reason. Like, he made it that way for a reason. You're supposed to be attracted to your wife before you get married, and that's like a great thing. But I feel like he's using this car analogy because he's the only way he's thinking about marriage, and the main problem perhaps that he sees with marriage maybe, is that you're locked into a sexual living situation with what he's saying is kind of like a car that's value is constantly going down, and it doesn't give you what you need in different areas of life. And I'm like, maybe he's talking about marriage as more than a sexual living situation, but for some reason, maybe it's because he said he was comparing people to cars. That's all that I hear is he's not thinking about the benefits of marriage from a family perspective. Like, good luck raising a family. I mean, and you can do it. You can raise a family without, a marriage, but it's very, very, very difficult. Okay. And it does not produce, even when done exceptionally well, the fruit that it could have produced had you done it through marriage. Okay. And that shouldn't be affronting to anybody. I'm not dissing single parents. I'm not dissing, other forms of family. I'm not personally attacking people. I'm just saying, you need to be, I'm educating young people because there are all kinds of narratives about family and marriage being pushed at them, and saying people are trying to sell different forms of marriage as a good idea for them to live their life. And I want you to be very well informed as far as the numbers go, as far as the empirical data goes, as far as, not just a sampling bias goes, but the vast majority of people are healthy through this outlet and not others. Okay. And so you need to know that. But yeah, I don't think of marriage as, I think this is a great point that Jeremy made. Don't think of marriage as only a romantic living situation. Don't think of marriage as only a sexual living situation, a sexual lifestyle. Think of marriage as a romantic, sexual, and family and religious lifestyle. I mean, it's an all-encompassing unit, okay? And so I think that's a great point. Hope you guys have enjoyed this review. I want to go back and watch the original conversation between James, Sexton, and Carl Lentz on, where they argue why people should not get married young, because that would be something really good to review on the show, and compare what they're saying to actual numbers. That, again, if you're curious as to where I got them, it's through a guy named Brad Wilcox. He's a professor of sociology at the University of Virginia and is commonly acknowledged by all the experts that I've heard, regardless of political affiliation or religious affiliation, as one of the world's leading authorities on marriage. And so go check out his book. It's called Get Married: Why Americans Should Defy the Elites, Forge Strong Families, and Save Civilization. I really enjoyed reading it this past summer, and he has a PDF in the back of that book that he calls the enhancement. And in that enhancement, he has very, very detailed and solid current study evidence. And it's just the best data. It's the newest data that we have. Okay. And so I would encourage you to look at the data. And thanks so much for listening today. If you liked what you heard, reach out and let me know what you thought through the YouTube comments or through a Facebook and Instagram message to the show's channel. I would love to hear from you. It would make me feel super connected to you as an audience member. It would make the podcasting system two-way instead of a conversation or a boring monologue on my end. We can get to talking to each other, and I would really like that. So thanks so much for listening today, and I will talk to you guys next time.